Hello and welcome to the rest of season top 150 show. My name is Adam Levitan. Each and every Wednesday, we will be here to discuss, you guessed it, our rest of season top 150 rankings and how that plays into the season-long trade market, perhaps the rest of season best ball markets, buy lows, sell highs, etc. For this today, I'm joined by two members of our projections team, Mark Dankenbring and Jack Miller. Mark, how's it going today?
It's pretty good. I somehow managed to pick up a little bit of a cold despite not leaving the house for the last 2 weeks. So I'm not sure how that happened, but excited to talk some football here with you guys today.
Well, you must have gone somewhere. There's no other explanation. Jack, how's it going?
Going well. Similar boat as Mark, where allergies are acting up a little bit, but mostly doing pretty good.
Good. Each week, we do a rest of season top 150 ranking set. We put a ton of work into this. Our entire team chips in, led by Mark. We take this seriously. This is not some BS list we pull out of our ass. You can get access to these rankings through DraftKit Pro or in-season package. Be sure to stay tuned to the end of this show. We will throw out some trade/transaction ideas we have. And then the last 5 or 10 minutes, we will take your questions. If you do not have the in-season package yet, you need to rectify that so that you have access to all of our content, Silva's matchups, projections, rankings, all the shows, etc. Head to stopjusttherun.com/subscribe for more. All right. I'm honestly kind of tired of talking about the Cleveland Browns running back situation. However, we need to talk about it yet again because, Mark, as expected, the Cleveland Browns went out and signed Kareem Hunt. Now, I think that people get out over their skis on these dusty running backs. Like, I was told a million times, Dalvin is better than Brees. Dalvin's going to go in there and crush for the Jets. I was told a million times that Melvin Gordon, he signed with the Ravens. Now that J.K. Dobbins is out, Melvin Gordon is going to crush. Melvin Gordon played 0 snaps on Sunday, by the way. I was told that Leonard Fournette is going to get picked up and be a huge thorn in the side of all these younger running backs. I was told that Ezekiel Elliott was going to be productive as a member of the New England Patriots. There is a reason that Kareem Hunt was not signed for so long. These washed, withered running backs, you do not get it back. And so I feel good about us being high on Jerome Ford here, while also understanding that Jerome Ford is not going to be a full-blown workhorse. So, Mark, I don't know if this is a formatting issue or not, but I do not believe we have Kareem Hunt in the top 150, and we have Jerome Ford up here at 59 overall. What do you think about the Hunt versus Ford situation?
We could probably get Hunt into the back end of the 150. Obviously, the signing wasn't official until about an hour or two ago, and we kind of posted this live early this morning. So we could probably get Hunt there in the back end. I kind of see the scenario playing out as Jerome Ford is going to be the RB1, the 1A there, as you mentioned. And, we have him kind of lumped in around Miles Sanders, which I think is an interesting comp, like what we've seen with Miles Sanders and Chuba Hubbard there in Carolina. I think is probably what we'll see with Ford and Kareem Hunt. I do expect Ford to be the 1A there, and he also has pass catching ability as well. I expect just with this offense, kind of in the offseason, despite how Deshaun Watson has looked in the first 2 weeks, I expect them to lean more pass heavy as the season goes along, just with their personnel and with Chubb injured. And, we know Ford can catch passes. So I expect him to probably get 60 to 70% of the work on the ground, and then Hunt, kind of fill in that area as well. And then I think the biggest, kind of question mark that I'm interested to see how it plays out is the goal line usage and, the potential touchdown upside for Ford and Hunt here, because Hunt, was often subbed in over Nick Chubb in his time in Cleveland. And while I do think he's probably washed, and there is a good reason, the Browns didn't bring him back earlier, I do think that is a little bit of a concern for Jerome Ford early on. And hopefully he can get that goal line role.
Yeah, I do think that I would have, now that we know it's official, I do think I would have Jerome Ford in the back end of the top 150 here, but I like where we have Jerome Ford and being aggressive. One thing I would note on Cleveland stuff, maybe Deshaun Watson is like never going to turn it around in Cleveland. I mean, he was so bad for 6 games last year. He's not been good for 2 games this year. I'm a little bit worried about that, and that would flow through to the offense as a whole and Jerome Ford. So yeah, in terms of actionable stuff, I know it's not that actionable right now. Jerome Ford's already been picked up in your league. If Kareem Hunt is out there, I would probably add him anyways. But at this point, whoever picked up Jerome Ford is not trading them away anyways, I don't think. Speaking of trading away, though, Jack, there is a lot going on with Eagles backfield. I think that you can make a case for Kenny Gainwell. I think that you can make a case for DeAndre Swift as being the more valuable guy. Now, what we can't make a case for is Rashad Penny at this point. And whereas we started with 3 guys in the mix, I think it's down to 2, because even with Kenny Gainwell not playing last week, even with Boston Scott leaving early with a concussion, Rashad Penny played just 7 snaps. We have it ranked here, DeAndre Swift about 20 spots ahead of Kenneth Gainwell. Jack, if you could make a move here on Eagles backfield, what do you think it would be?
Yeah, I mean, Penny didn't even play until Boston Scott left, so I do think it's a 2-player backfield. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. I do think having Swift higher makes sense because he probably has more upside than Kenny Gainwell. What the word out of Eagles camp was all summer was that the Eagles liked Gainwell because he was seen as the most reliable, but he doesn't really. I don't think he has what Swift just did with 175 yards and a touchdown really in his weekly range of outcomes. So given this constant drumbeat that the Eagles coaching staff has all this faith in Gainwell and they think he's the most reliable option, I don't think he completely goes away, but I think for fantasy purposes, Swift is the guy with the actual league-winning ceiling, and so I think he's the guy that you want to own in that backfield for the wider range of outcomes.
I've been waiting for years for someone to let DeAndre Swift loose. And they let him loose, and look what happens. The guy goes completely berserk. I think the toothpaste is out of the tube here. And it's not great for my bags because I have a ton of Kenny Gainwell. But if anyone, like Jack said, I agree. If anyone's going to consolidate here, in other words, emerge as the guy gets 60, 70, 75% of the work, it will be Swift. I don't think that's likely, but if anybody does it, I think it will be Swift at this point. And so if people think out there that Swift is a fluke, I would not mind putting in an offer for him. Again, we're down to 2 men here in this backfield for the most part. Let's keep it moving, Mark, to the Detroit situation. So people who took Jahmyr Gibbs end of round 3, round 4 probably are not too enthused right now. However, they are very excited. And we don't celebrate injuries here, especially to someone who, my God, I am up to my neck in David Montgomery in best ball share. So we're not celebrating David Montgomery injuries here. However, you're not going to be able to trade for Jahmyr Gibbs right now because this is the time that people have been waiting for. How would you be thinking about Detroit running back right now, Mark?
Well, I think at least with Montgomery, it should be a relatively short-term injury. It's just a thigh bruise, so nothing too severe. We don't even have Craig Reynolds in the top 150 here. He could probably be a potential stopgap for you if you need the running back help, just with how many top-tier running backs have gone down in the last couple of weeks. But in terms of Jahmyr Gibbs, it definitely feels like wheels up for him, at least in terms of the passing work. He did see 9 targets in that week 2 game against Seattle. And that's really where his fantasy bread is going to be buttered this season, is in the passing game. Obviously we love, the Detroit offensive coordinator and what he's able to scheme up. Gibbs playing with Jared Goff in the dome. You've dubbed it the Coors Field of NFL fantasy, which I love. And so I think Gibbs, I wouldn't expect him to take over the majority of the rushing work, even with David Montgomery down, but surely on I think almost all, obvious passing downs, 2-minute work, that's going to be Jahmyr Gibbs. So, in PPR leagues, our rankings are geared more towards half PPR, but in PPR, I think Gibbs could even be in like the top 24, players. He would easily, I think, be a top 2 round pick on PPR leagues if we were redrafting today. So I think, wheels up for him for sure. You're on mute.
We have Saquon Barkley 1 spot behind Jahmyr Gibbs here, and that might be a trade you might be able to pull off if you wanted to. I want to be very clear. We are estimating and guessing on injury timelines on these guys, just like everyone else is. And so, there's not a clean mathematical formula or a clean way to think about how long these guys are going to be out. We'll get to some more hurt guys in a minute here. I think Saquon Barkley will be back in the next 1 to 3 weeks, but we've seen an ankle, like Gabe Davis sprained his ankle week 2 last year. He was literally never the same. Literally the entire year, never the same. And so we try to bake some of that in, really close between Gibbs and Barkley. If you wanted to make that swap, someone might actually accept that. Yeah. Okay. Keep it moving here to, where am I at? Let's keep moving to the Bengals situation, Jack. I mean, I just mentioned the injury stuff. The injury stuff with Burrow is not good. Now, I think that he was mostly healthy for weeks 1 and 2. I'm not going to allow people to say he wasn't playing well in weeks 1 and 2 because of the calf. Maybe tape bros out there want to say that that's the case. What's for sure true, though, is that on the second touchdown pass to T. Higgins, Joe Burrow aggravated his calf, and I would consider him on the good side of a questionable tag for week 3, but maybe not himself. And so that kind of creates a whole weird thing going on with the Bengals and the season long and the trade market here. A lot of people have sent me in the DMs, they've sent me trades involving Jamar Chase. There's certainly some panic out there. Jack, if you had Jamar Chase, how would you be thinking about it right now and anything else on the Bengals?
Yeah, I wouldn't be panicking with Jamar Chase. I do think this is a scenario where it kind of comes down to, like, it's a different question if you're 2-0 versus if you're 0-2, because as Burrow gets better from the calf, he might not even play week 3. Jamar's short-term production could take a hit. Maybe if you're 0-2, you don't go out and sell the farm for a player who's already going to be valued very highly. But then the hope is, I guess, by December that Burrow will be back, be healthy. I think he's in real doubt for this week. So if you're 2-0 and you can afford to, plan for the late season, I think Jamar rate goes up in value a little bit, but on the whole, I'm not too concerned long term about the Bengals options.
Yeah, it's hard, man. Cavs are hard for sure and hard to play with. We've dropped Jamar Chase to 6 overall before the season. We had him at 2 overall. So yeah, I mean, it started to fall for Jamar Chase. Mark, I know you're a Cincy guy. Anything you want to add here? Because I can see a case for both. I can see a case for being like, let's not panic on Jamar Chase. And I can see a case for, hey, there's safer guys out there that don't have an injured quarterback right now.
Right. I'm kind of in that latter portion. I'm a little more concerned than Jack is, just in terms of this calf injury lingering longer. Burrow is such a hyper competitive person. Like, he's not going to want to sit out. And I think this could be a lingering issue almost all season. I did bet the Bengals a little bit to miss the playoffs just with this. I think it could snowball a little bit. And just the backup options there, Jake Browning, is not really a quality backup quarterback. So I agree, kind of, if you could get another wide receiver 1 for Jamar Chase, like if you could get a Diggs or Amon-Ra St. Brown, I would probably trade that straight up if you could. I agree with Jack. I probably wouldn't sell low on Chase just because the upside towards the end of the season is so high. And, at the end of the day, we're trying to win leagues here. If we're struggling a little bit in weeks 3, 4, and 5, like ideally we're building our team to capitalize on the end of season upside. So I wouldn't necessarily sell low on him, but if you could kind of get, almost equal or slightly below Chase value back in return, I'd be somewhat interested in that.
Yeah, I mean, Brian makes a good point in chat. The Bengals are 0-2 and the Ravens are 2-0. I mean, if they go out there with Jake Browning, they're going to be 0-3. Like, they're going to be 0-3 with Jake Browning. So yeah, I mean, that's certainly something to consider. I don't think they'll put him out there if he's in danger of aggravating more, but yeah, certainly scary. All right. Story of the week, of the year, of course, has been Rams, and specifically Rams wide receiver, although all Rams for sure if we include Kyren Williams. But we have, I can't believe I'm saying this. I can't believe I'm saying it. We have Puka Nacua 1 spot ahead of Cooper Kupp in the rankings now. This is an impossible thing to think about. We do not know how long Cooper Kupp is going to be out, when he'll be back. I think he'll be back week 5 or 6, but I'm just literally guessing. And I think he'll certainly be at higher risk aggravation at that point. Everybody wants an answer to the question, how will Puka be hurt by Cooper Kupp coming back? Obviously, Puka will be hurt a lot. However, Puka's shown an ability to win on the outside. So we tried to break in some injury risk here. I think if you told me Cooper Kupp was going to be 100% starting in week 5, I would have Cooper Kupp back in the top 15 for sure. We just can't say that for sure. So Mark, I know that you thought a lot about this one. What do you think about if you had Puka right now, or if you had Kupp, how would you be handling this?
It's certainly really interesting. I think, you could argue both ways on this for a long time, just depending, you said, on the uncertainty with the Kupp injury. I think is, kind of top of the table here when just looking at how to assess the situation. I do think Puka, like when we just kind of look at his range of outcomes, if we knew that Cooper Kupp was out for the rest of the season, I would think Puka Nacua would easily be a wide receiver 1, probably slotted like right behind Devontae Adams. I mean, just in terms of our week 3 projection on Puka Nacua, we're projecting him for a 31% target share, which is reserved for guys like Devontae, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, the elite of the elite. So early on, the usage has been outstanding. And then if Cooper Kupp comes back, I think it's fair to say that, Puka Nacua is going to be the clear wide receiver 2 there. And, it's an easy comp just to say, oh, he'll kind of fill the Robert Woods role of old. But I do think that is an accurate comp there for Puka. So he could, I think, be, a locked in wide receiver 2 in that scenario, just given what we've seen from the Rams offense. And early on, or coming into the season, especially with this Kupp injury, I think we were all worried just systemically about the Rams failing here, similar to how they did last year with a weak offensive line, Stafford with the injury concerns, potential retirement, all that stuff that's been surrounding the Rams since their Super Bowl win. So I think with those concerns, quelled a little bit, like I'm more interested in investing in the Rams offense. So I think Puka is again locked in wide receiver 2 rest of the way, regardless of what happens with Cooper Kupp. And if Cooper Kupp is out longer, he's still in that wide receiver 1 range. So if people are undervaluing him, I think he is like a potential still buy high given his role. And I probably wouldn't be trading him unless I could get one of those locked in, wide receiver 1s ahead of him.
Okay. I'm going to stick with the Rams for a second here, Jack, with Kyren Williams. We have him up to RB16. Obviously, this is a massive boost for Kyren. He's up 40 spots from last week on the news that Cam Akers is done, going to be traded or cut, whatever. We're not going to get into the whole Cam Akers situation now. It's still very, very confusing. But what we know is that Kyren Williams had the most outrageous role I've seen for a running back in a long time. He played 76 snaps on Sunday. I mean, a lot of snaps for running back these days is like 40 or 45 or 50 in a game. He played 76 snaps. And the crazy thing about Kyren Williams is that he's actually, I think, better in the pass game than he is as a runner. That's kind of his calling card going back to Notre Dame. And so we have him up here at RB16, ahead of Madison, ahead of Brian Robinson, ahead of Miles Sanders, ahead of Jerome Ford, kind of in that range with James Cook, and a tier below Aaron Jones. I think that's fair. And maybe people are going to say we're overrating Kyren Williams. If I had him, I would not be just giving him away right now. Jack, any thoughts on Kyren?
Yeah, I think right now Christian McCaffrey has the best role in the NFL, and I think Kyren Williams legitimately has a pretty good case for second. Like you mentioned, he played 95% of snaps last week. So far, he's run around on 76.5% of Matthew Stafford's dropbacks, has a 13% target share, was the only Rams running back to have an opportunity, either a carry or a target. So, yeah, I think in the short term, the role is absolutely elite, and he's an RB1. The question is just, can this day 3 pick, who we haven't seen much from before, keep it up the whole season? And I think that's a fair question to ask. I think a point in his favor is the buzz out of Rams camp all last offseason was that they absolutely loved Kyren Williams and that they had a big role plan for him. Then he got hurt on the opening kickoff. So I think this is maybe something that has just been building up for a couple of years, and now we're finally getting to see Sean McVay put Kyren Williams in the role he wants. And he probably doesn't want him playing 95% of snaps, but I do think that he's going to be super involved the entire season, and it's hard to see them going out and adding someone. So I think it's fair just a question if Kyren can keep this up for the entire year. But for now, I mean, it's a fantastic role, and he's an RB1 in my opinion.
All right. Agreed. A guy who we moved up a bunch in the rankings at the wide receiver position was Michael Pittman, up 15 spots this week to 40th overall. Obviously, we only saw 18 snaps from Anthony Richardson last week. Anthony Richardson remains in the concussion protocol, but it's not that big a concern. I mean, Gardner Minshew, I think, is one of the better backups in the entire NFL. Mark, look, I think there's still some people out there. Well, it's hard to say if you have Pittman, what you think on him right now. I assume if you drafted Pittman, you probably liked him and Anthony Richardson anyways. So, like, you're not looking to get out from it. But, yeah, what do you think about handling Michael Pittman right now, Mark?
Well, the role for Pittman has been outstanding, and I think this is going to kind of become a trend for me, at least personally, is betting more so on coaches that we believe in, almost more so than players. Like what Nick Sirianni has done for the Colts offense early on is just amazing for fantasy. They're a super fast paced team. They've been running a ton of plays. They are 10th currently in pass rate over expectation through 2 weeks with, and with Anthony Richardson, we were expecting them to run a ton, and that hasn't been the case. Michael Pittman has seen 32% of the Colts targets thus far. Obviously anything over, anything around or above 30% is elite. And then the Colts utilization of their players has been extremely condensed as well. They're pretty much only playing 3 wide receivers. Pittman has run 98% of the routes through 2 weeks. Alec Pierce has run 93%, and Josh Downs is at 77%. So Pittman's out there every play. They're playing fast. They're throwing more than we were expecting. And things just look good for, Pittman in general. This Colts offense is pretty bad. They've given up a lot of explosive plays to the Jags and the Texans through 2 weeks. So I think, the Colts are going to be inclined to throw. And then we saw once Anthony Richardson went out with a concussion this past week, Gardner Minshew stepped in and, operated the offense. So when we kind of talk about potential backup quarterbacks, like I think Gardner Minshew is one of the better ones in the league. So Pittman is a buy high for me. It's, that's kind of one of my moves to make this week is buy high on Michael Pittman. So I'm firmly a believer and think it's going to continue to be a good year for him.
Okay. Yeah. One of my moves to make last week was trade for Anthony Richardson. He was about to go completely berserk if he didn't get that concussion in that game. He had already had 17 fantasy points on just 18 snaps, was about to go completely nuke. A couple more quick ones here to hit on before we get to moves to make and your questions. Bears backfield. I just wanted to point out that I think it's an interesting time to trade for Roschon Johnson or add Roschon Johnson. I know he didn't do much, but the fact they deactivated Deontay Foreman, I thought was at least notable. We still have Khalil Herbert ahead of Roschon Johnson by about 30 spots, but like my gut says Roschon in the next few weeks is going to overtake, and they're going to make some changes there. And one of the changes will be putting Khalil Herbert back in that change of pace role. So if you can get your hands on Roschon Johnson right now, I think that is an interesting one. Last one I wanted to mention, or second to last one I wanted to mention, Jack, is the Pittsburgh running back spot. We've made the move. It's happened. The move that everybody wants. Well, everybody except for the people who drafted Najee Harris, but everybody really wants. We now have Jaylen Warren ranked ahead of Najee Harris. Najee Harris all the way down to 105 overall. Obviously was one of our bigger fades for this season. Looks good so far. Just offensive ineptitude from Pittsburgh, plus what we expected. Year 3 of Najee Harris, like they've seen enough, man. I mean, Jaylen Warren's going to get in there. I know that Najee has the first round draft capital. Jaylen Warren made an almost even split in a neutral script game throughout on Monday night. So, yeah, I mean, at this point, if you have Najee Harris, I don't even know what you would do. Like, there's almost no way anybody's going to trade for Najee Harris right now. But, Jack, any ideas for people holding the bag on Najee or anything else?
I think you just kind of have to hold Najee. The public perception around him is so bad right now that like no one is going to, unless you can find someone who's just holding on to the draft capital of, 4th round ADP. I think you kind of just have to hold on to him because there's not really a market for these guys who are just tanking in value. But it does seem like in the second half on Monday, the Steelers started to use Warren more. They noticed he's more explosive. They've already been using him on passing downs. So I definitely think it's a big step in the right direction for Warren and a downgrade for Harris.
Last thing I wanted to mention here was the Las Vegas situation, Mark, because I know they went into Buffalo and it was ugly. They ran so few plays, and maybe people are disappointed right now in their Josh Jacobs bags. Note that we still have Josh Jacobs 15 overall here. So, yeah, what do you think about Las Vegas stuff right now, Mark?
Yeah, you mentioned the low play count. They ran 39 plays in Buffalo. It's only the second time an NFL team has run fewer than 40 plays since 2018. So certainly an outlier performance there. But even in that game, Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs had 14 of the team's 23 targets. And then in week 1, those two, Devontae, Josh Jacobs, and Jacoby Myers had 22 of the 26 targets for the Raiders in week 1. So this offense is shaping up similar to last year where Jacobs and Adams just took, almost so much workload. And then offense, like add Jacoby Myers, and those three are the only 3 rosterable people from the Raiders. And I think, good players to target for sure. I think Josh Jacobs, his role is so elite right now in terms of running back touches. He had 100% of the running back rush attempts in week 2 against Buffalo until Zamir White came in on, the last drive in garbage time and got a few, and then had 95% of the running back rush attempts in week 1. So his role is outstanding. I would be willing to buy Josh Jacobs as, a locked in RB1 if people are scared off by the inefficiency and just, we love targeting these condensed offenses in fantasy. So I think, if people are either drop Jacoby Myers because he's injured or worried about that, I think he's a good target. And then Devontae and Jacobs, I think, are again just locked into kind of round 1 value right now.
Agreed. I mean, there's very few running backs in the league who get the kind of workload that have the workload talent combination that Josh Jacobs has. From Yater, he says, is Zach Charbonnet still worth stashing? If not, names to pick up to stash over him. Yes. Hopefully you have DraftKit Pro and you can see this, but part of the reason we do this is that you can see where we have Zach Charbonnet related to other running backs. And so if you if you have DraftKit Pro, head to the rest season top 150, you'll see we have Zach Charbonnet right in that kind of Antonio Gibson, Roshan Johnson, Zach Moss, Pirine type range there at the bottom. I do think Charbonnet is still worth stashing. Kenneth Walker was extremely inefficient once again on Sunday, which doesn't bother me as a fantasy player, but might bother the Seahawks and maybe why they used a 2nd-round pick on Charbonnet. And so I would definitely be hanging on to him. All right, let's get to some moves to make. I felt good about my moves to make last week, man. I felt like a real trading season-long bro out here. It was sell Breece Hall before he goes and face plants. When everybody's so excited about Breece Hall, sell Breece Hall before he goes and face plants in Dallas, and trade for Anthony Richardson. I'll start off this week with maybe a similarly controversial one. Trade for Justin Fields. It's bad right now for Justin Fields. I mean, real bad. Looks completely lost out there. He's out here disparaging the coaches in the media, which is never a good sign. We saw this last year where he started off completely inept, and then they were like, you know what? Let's just lean into what Justin Fields does well. Is that even too much to ask, Luke Getsy? We're going to start leaning into what Justin Fields does well. Not throwing short, not having 1 or 2 designed runs a game. We're going to design 8 to 10 runs per game for him. And we're going to start getting the ball deep down the field, which plays into Justin Fields' strengths. I think they'll figure it out. And I love Tua and I love Burrow and I love Cousins and I love Dimes and all these guys. The ceiling on Justin Fields when he runs like he did last year is absolutely outrageous. And so I'm looking to get all superstar ceilings into my lineups. If someone is totally panicked on Justin Fields right now, I would go out and get him. I just think that it's going to turn around for him from a fantasy perspective. Maybe not from real life, but from a fantasy perspective, I think it will turn around for Justin Fields. That's my first one. We're going to do 2 each here. Jack, why don't you go ahead with your first one?
Yeah, I'm going to do trade for Jaden Reed, which might sound like a weird one considering he just had 2 touchdowns. So maybe his value is at a relative high, but I think that the underlying metrics are pretty encouraging. He has 13 targets on 38 routes run this year for 0.34 targets per route run. That's an elite number. He's played well enough to, I think, earn more routes in the future. And as a rookie, they're going to not give him a full allotment of snaps right away. So while he's not running that many routes, I think it's pretty reasonable to expect that number to grow. And the fact that he's already earning targets is a big plus for me. I don't think it would be surprising if by the end of the year, Jaden Reed is leading the Packers in targets. So I think that the fantasy community is a lot smarter than they were 5 or 10 years ago, and everyone would see the 2 touchdowns and just go out and buy that. I think people might think of Jaden Reed as a sell high coming off of a game in which he had 2 touchdowns, but I think that I think he's on an upward trajectory. So I'm looking to buy him despite the good game on Sunday.
Yeah, well, I think that you can definitely buy Jaden Reed if you want to, because people are like, oh, well, Christian Kirk's coming back and Jordan Love's playing way above his head from an efficiency standpoint right now. I mean, you can make a pretty good case, I think, to sell on Jaden Reed. So yeah, you might be able to get him cheaply. We have him 127 overall. I like Jaden Reed. I mean, I have a ton of Jaden Reed from the season-long process, and I hope that it continues. But I have more Christian Watson. I mean, this guy doesn't come back soon. I'm going to need a loan or somewhere else to live or something. I need Christian Watson back in the lineup badly. Mark, what is your first transaction to make?
I'm going to buy high on another wide receiver, and that's Michael Pittman. And I hit on it, a little bit earlier in the show, but I just think his role is pretty elite right now, and he's a locked in wide receiver 2 with potential wide receiver 1 upside if Anthony Richardson continues to play this well. I just want to bet on Nick Sirianni in this offense, given the signs we've seen early on. I think Pittman is, clearly a talented player. Last year in the Colts offense was just such a mess. I think we can kind of throw it out, and he had a very strong rookie year, and I think this year he's going to be a locked in wide receiver 2 moving forward. And I think people probably drafted him in the 7th, 8th round, so they're not completely tied to him. And I think you could probably trade someone like a Brandon Ayuk, DeAndre Hopkins, guys we have just below him in the rankings to secure Michael Pittman. And I want to buy high on him right now.
Okay. My second move to make here today is going to be add or trade for Kendre Miller. Now, this was one that I was on before the season. It has not gone that well, but I just never had much respect for Jamal Williams' game. I thought last year was a complete fluke that was induced by a very good Lions offensive environment and run game environment, as well as an outlier amount of 1 and 2 yard touchdown runs for Jamal Williams. He also has a hamstring injury now. They did nothing when Alvin Kamara was suspended and Kendre Miller picked up this hamstring injury. They added Tony Jones, who's like a borderline NFL player. And so now Kendre Miller is expected back this week for week 3, could be featured right away. And like, given the way Jamal Williams played the first 2 weeks and now a hamstring injury, the guy is like a backup at best. And so if Kendre Miller can just like seize control here while Jamal Williams is out, he can be the 1B behind Alvin Kamara when he returns. And by the way, on Kamara, I've always loved Alvin Kamara. I love him as a dude. He like goes to Montana and like lives in the mountains and unplugs all his internet or whatever. Like I dig Alvin Kamara. He was an awesome fantasy player for so long. I was worried last year, man. I mean, down the stretch last year in big games, third downs were going to like Mark Ingram, who's now doing games on Fox. I mean, and that's because Alvin Kamara just was not that good last year. And so I don't think it's out of the range of outcomes for Kendre Miller to actually end up as the lead back here eventually for the Saints, the kind of guy I want to have on my bench. And maybe I can even start him this week, depending on how things go with the hamstring and all that. So add or trade for Kendre Miller would be my second one. Jack, what is your second and final move to make?
Yeah, I'm going to do add Nathaniel Dell. He's probably rostered in some leagues already, but I did trade for Nico Collins last week, and we had some feedback that he was just on the waiver wire. So if that's the case, I think Tank Dell's definitely on the waiver wire. He ran 47 routes on 57 CJ Stroud dropbacks, 10 targets, 7 catches, 72 yards and a touchdown. That was his first game with Noah Brown on injured reserve, and they basically put him on a full-time role, and he played great. John Mechie played 14 snaps, so I think he's pretty clearly the wide receiver 4 or even 5 besides Xavier Hutchinson there. I don't think CJ Stroud is going to pass the ball 58 times per game, but I do think that there's a pretty clear path for Tank Dell eventually overtaking Robert Woods as the wide receiver 2 and getting a pretty decent target share there. So yeah, add Nathaniel Dell.
All right. For you guys who don't know who Jack was talking about there, Tank Dell is Nathaniel is his real name. Jack is being very proper. He goes by Tank. 2 tanks in the NFL these days, Tank Bigsby and Tank Dell. Mark, go ahead with your second and final move to make.
Well, I agree with Jack on liking to invest in the Houston passing game in general, and mine's going to kind of go in a different direction here, and that's going to be sell low on Dameon Pierce. And this one's hard for me because I came into the season wanting to bet on Dameon Pierce with, Houston tried to revamp their offensive line. Unfortunately, they've been stricken by injuries there. 4 to their 5 starting offensive linemen were out in week 2. And the utilization for Dameon Pierce has been really bad through 2 weeks. He's played under 50% of the snaps, only ran 35% of the routes. He's losing the long down and distance and 2-minute work to his backups. So, we are a little worried that Devin Singletary would be a slight thorn in the side, but they're mixing in 3 backs there, which is just, committees that we want to avoid. I think with the running back attrition that we've seen in the last couple of weeks and guys going to pick up, Matt Breida and Craig Reynolds and names like that, I think people are still willing to buy Dameon Pierce. So I'd be willing to get out now, just given the underlying usage and what we've seen from the Texans so far. I think they're going to lean more into CJ Stroud in the passing game, and I don't really think Dameon Pierce's role is going to reflect that. So I'm going to sell low on Dameon Pierce.
Yeah, I mean, one of my biggest strategies during the season was just skip over that entire tier: J.K. Dobbins, Pierce, Cam Akers, Miles Sanders, and it's run out incredibly, incredibly well, like better than I ever could have hoped for fading that tier. So yeah, so far, so good there. All right. We got about 5 or 10 minutes here. We will answer as many of your questions as quickly as we can here. Appreciate everyone who is hanging out in chat. I'll scroll up a little bit here. All right. Who would you rather have, Jaden Reed or Tank Dell right here? I think that would be Jaden Reed. For me, Dell, I like also, but just such a small prospect and coming off of a game against the Colts, who might have the worst secondary in the entire league. But that's a close one. What do you think, Jack? Jaden Reed or Tank Dell?
Yeah, I'm going Reed as well. Just for the higher draft capital is the difference for me.
For Mark, trade Calvin Ridley straight up for Jamar Chase. Calvin Ridley or Jamar Chase straight up right now?
Man, that's tough. I think I would probably still lean Jamar Chase, like ever so slightly. Especially if you're 2-0 or 1-1. If you're 0-2, I would actually probably trade for Ridley and hope he can, lead you to some wins over the next couple weeks. But yeah, that's super close.
Rashad White or Michael Pittman for the rest of the season. Now, Rashad White had like the most efficient game I can ever remember from Rashad White this past week. Keep in mind, the Bears are like, my God. On defense, the Bears are just a total stone cold mess. That said, I don't think they really want to lean too much on Sean Tucker. Chase Edmonds has not been good and been hurt. And so I do think the role for Rashad White is really safe. Jack, any thoughts on this one? Rashad White or Pittman for the rest of the season?
Yeah, that's Pittman for me for sure. I'm concerned about White holding on to that job the whole year.
Yeah, schedule coming up for Rashad White. Very difficult. Also, Chaiwan says he woke up at 7 a.m. to grab Kendry. That would be impressive, Kendry, except I was up at 5:30 a.m. taking care of kids. All right, but so I don't want to hear about this 7 a.m. nonsense. All right, dude. Brian makes a point that all the quarterback issues were a problem last year for Kamara. He's going to get someone to throw him the ball, and Carr throws him the ball. I think that's fair. The rushing metrics on Kamara were not nearly as strong as they've been in the past, but I do think that's fair. But that's what I'm saying. Like, put Alvin Kamara in a strict pass catching role and let Kendry Miller be like your more Mark Ingram type, even though I think Kendry Miller is more explosive. So yeah. Would you give up Swift and London for Josh Jacobs in a 12-team PPR, Mark? Give up DeAndre Swift and Drake London, he of the Fighting Arthur Smiths, for Josh Jacobs in full PPR.
I think I would do that just with how strong Jacobs' role has been through 2 weeks. Swift and London, I think, are probably starters in a 12-team league. So if you have some decent depth to be able to, survive that over the next few weeks, I would do that. And I think Jacobs is the clear best player there. And I think now is a decent time to sell DeAndre Swift, just because we haven't seen what the mix will be like with him and Gainwell, both active and healthy. So I think now's an interesting time. It could burn a little bit if Gainwell stays out for a bit, but yeah, I would do that deal.
Matt says, do we prefer Jahan Dotson and Jacoby Myers types on our bench, or rookies like Jaden Reed and Tank Dell? I think Jahan Dotson and Jacoby Myers are both better NFL players right now than Reed and Dell, period. And Dotson and Jacoby have like every down roles. So I would stick with the veterans here. Jack, any further thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to Elijah Moore or Jaden Reed for the rest of the season, Mark. I'm worried about Deshaun Watson, like I said at the beginning, man. Elijah Moore or Jaden Reed?
I think Elijah Moore. I do like Jaden Reed a lot. I have have a lot more of him just because he was a lot cheaper than Elijah Moore coming in. But certainly the usage has been really good for Elijah Moore early on. And kind of like I said earlier when we were talking about Jerome Ford, I think Cleveland's really going to lean into the passing game with Chubb out. So I think, we can probably project Elijah Moore for 1 to 2 more targets, per game. And I think just talent wise, he's probably equal, if not better than Jaden Reed. So I'd lean Elijah there.
Okay. From Ratcliffe family, he says, I'm an Austin Eckler owner. How much would you sweeten the pot for Pollard or Bijan in a trade? 1-for-1 may be suspect for the Pollard or Bijan owners. So I don't know what's going on with Austin Eckler's ankle, man. I've been trying to find information on it. I've been trying to ask people. I don't have anything yet. I expect to have something more on Austin Eckler's injury soon because, quite frankly, he does a freaking fantasy football podcast every week, and I assume that Harmon is going to ask him about it. And so the sim is so broken. But regardless, I think we're going to get more information there soon. If Eckler is healthy, his ankle is fine, I don't think we would have him that much below Pollard or Bijan here. Eckler's still an awesome asset. So I would just be holding Eckler at this point and trying to wait for more information. If you think the information is going to be bad, then yeah, I would be sweetening the pot to get Pollard or Bijan. I think Pollard and Bijan are also both in awesome roles. Talked about both their roles with Silva on Team by Team yesterday. Hopefully you guys caught that. Here's an interesting one, Jack. Should we be selling high on Jordan Addison? Now, Jordan Addison has operated as the wide receiver 3 for the Vikings. However, only 3 wide receivers have run a route all season for the Vikings. So it's still an awesome role. Eventually, I think he's going to pass KJ Osborne for routes, I think. But what do you think about this one, Jack? Would you be selling high right now on Jordan Addison?
I would not. I think this is exactly what you want to see from a rookie. Even though Osborne's ahead of him in like snaps and routes, Addison has had 2 deep touchdowns in 2 games. He's frankly just a better player than KJ Osborne, and I expect that the talent's going to win out in the end. Obviously, Justin Jefferson and Hawk are commanding massive target shares, but the Vikings also have the second highest pass rate over expectation in the league and a pretty bad defense, so they're going to have to throw a ton this year. I think if anything, I'd be looking to buy Jordan Addison as opposed to selling him.
Okay. I like that take. I agree. From Dusty Hobson, he says, will we trade Puka straight up for Kyron? This is a 10-team full PPR mark. Puka straight up for Kyron. Ram on Ram crime here.
If you start 3 wide receivers in this league, I would say no, just because of bye weeks and potential injuries. I think you're going to want to have Puka on the team. If you only start 2 wide receivers and 2 running backs, man, I don't know, because Montgomery and Sanders on the bench, I think, is like pretty solid and similar range to Kyron when he's healthy. So I'd probably hold on to Puka. And I think, again, there's still elite upside there if Cooper Kupp doesn't come back by week 5 or is, re-aggravates anything or whatever. I think the upside still is better for Puka. And in 10-team leagues, we're shooting for that a bit more. So I'd keep Puka.
Yeah. I mean, anytime it's close, I'm going to lean wide receiver, man. I mean, that's just going to be the way it is for me. From Jason, he says, would you deal Christian Watson and Jerome Ford for Deebo Samuel? He says it's full PPR, stronger at running back than wide receiver. I mean, I don't want to give up on Christian Watson. I still like it, and I like Jerome Ford too. And so, I thought Christian Watson and Deebo were actually kind of close coming into this season. I am a known Deebo hater, but that's besides the point. Jack, what do you think about this one? Give up Christian Watson and Jerome Ford to get Deebo Samuel.
I would not be doing this trade. I think Ford is a pretty valuable asset right now. I think Christian Watson has a pretty good chance to play this week. So yeah, I'd be holding on to the pair there as opposed to going for Deebo.
From Lyndon C says, what's Raheem Mostert's trade value right now? Sell high or hold? I mean, they did not want to put Devon Achane out there. I mean, even after Salvon Ahmed got hurt, they did not want to put Devon Achane out there for a very long time. Now Salvon Ahmed is missing practice, probably going to miss some time. We know Jeff Wilson remains on IR return. I think the question on Raheem Mostert is simple. Can he hold up for the whole season at age 31 with a really long injury history? I'm tempted to sell on Raheem Mostert, but that could look really bad. I mean, dude can play and the offense is clicking. Mark, what do you think about handling Raheem Mostert right now?
I'd lean sell as well. When we were making the rankings and taking in feedback from the whole ETR team, this was a player we discussed, and we might be too low on him. we are kind of baking in, a high amount of injury risk. So obviously if he doesn't get injured, I think he's a locked in RB2, probably more in like the, running back 16 to 20 range. Whereas right now we have him at RB28. So I would lean selling him high, just especially after that big game on, primetime TV. Everyone saw the explosiveness for Mostert. So I'd lean selling. But certainly that could come back to bite you a little bit, but yeah, I'd lean sell there.
All right. LBJ says, what kind of package would you be willing to trade to get Breece Hall in redraft? I'm not, man, and I love Breece Hall. I love Breece Hall. Until they get an actual NFL quarterback in there, it's going to be very hard for Breece Hall to do it. And maybe they will, like maybe the Vikings wheels come off and they try to trade Kirk Cousins at the trade deadline. I don't even know if the money can work there or not. Or maybe the wheels come off Tennessee and they can get Ryan Tannehill or maybe Jameis Winston or Jacoby Brissett. I mean, an actual NFL quarterback would be a boost for Breece Hall. And we are baking in some chance of that into the rankings. Like if it's going to be Zach Wilson for the rest of the year, to me, Breece Hall is not even like a top 50 or top 60 player. We have him 38 overall right now on the hopes, I think, that they actually get an actual NFL quarterback in the mix here. But yeah, I would not be giving up much to get Breece Hall right now. Personally, I thought a big part of Breece Hall's bull case coming into the year was how effective Aaron Rodgers has been at getting fantasy points to the running back position. He's just like really, really good at it. So yeah, I don't know. Just don't like it. Just don't like it at all. All right, we'll do a couple more here. Little Big Man says, how do you feel about Jerry Jeudy rest of season? Yes, the Twitter docs guaranteed me that Jerry Jeudy was coming back too soon, and therefore he would re-aggravate in this game. He did not. Breaking news. Twitter docs swing and a miss. Jerry Jeudy, 36 out of 42 routes with Russ Wilson. Now, did not have a good game. Was not productive. He's fighting for targets with Brandon Johnson and Lil Jordan Humphrey, which is insane to me, and Courtland Sutton. And even with all these guys that are out, I mean, even Greg Dulcich is out now. It's just mind-boggling to me that the primary targets are not Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton with Marvin Mims, but they haven't been. Seems like Jerry Judy's only going to get healthier, though. Jack, any thoughts on handling Jerry Jeudy the rest of the season?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that his usage in week 2 was extremely good considering the expectations. There was some stuff during the week that he was going to be on a snap count. I think Sean Payton kind of rebuffed that going into Sunday, and then he obviously was not limited at all on Sunday. We've seen him be the clear wide receiver one when healthy before. So I think, Russell Wilson doesn't look particularly great, so that's something to consider in relation to Judy's preseason price. But I think in terms of Jeudy himself, it was fantastic to see the usage on Sunday.
These quarterback trades are always interesting, Mark, because it's so hard to value quarterbacks in one quarterback leagues. I can pick someone up off waivers a lot of weeks and get a reasonable start. But DV Loner says, would you give up Josh Allen to get Puka Nacua and Jerome Ford? Obviously, a lot would depend here on what your quarterback you would be left with, I think. But yeah, Mark, any thoughts on Josh Allen rest of the way?
I think I'd probably hold on to Josh Allen just with the elite upside that he has at the position. It is tough. Like Puka could, again, hate to just say it again, but depending on Cooper Kupp's injury, Puka could be a, locked in wide receiver 1 rest of the way. So a little bit of a risk there. If you feel good about your quarterback 2 option, let's say you have like a Sam Howell or Daniel Jones or something on the bench, I don't think that drop off is too big. So it kind of depends more on the quarterback 2 option there. If that's not good, then, I would lean keeping Josh Allen, but it kind of depends on your team construction.
I think a good point here from Ace Rosenthal. The spreadsheet versions have denied Adam Thielen a spot in the top 150. I kind of agree, and this makes me sick, but I think Adam Thielen's going to catch like 80 balls this year, man. And I know that's easy to say after Monday night, but I kind of like had that feeling before where DJ Chark is a vertical threat. All these other guys, Mingo, Chenault, Terrace Marshall can't really play. There's no big target earners at tight end or running back. Adam Thielen is going to fall into earning targets. And you see that, like when Bryce Young drops back, he knows the guy that's going to get open in the intermediate range is Adam Thielen. So I wouldn't be excited about it, but like in a pinch, if I had to start Adam Thielen, especially in full PPR, he can get you 4 or 5 catches a week, man. I think he will average around 4 or 5 catches a week. So if you wanted to add Adam Thielen, I think that's okay. It would be the most 8 condom play ever, but yeah, I think it's okay. I see some dynasty questions in here. We did just update our dynasty rankings and dynasty trade calculator. So if you go up here, you go to NFL season long, you can see our dynasty rankings here. And then you can also put in trades that include draft picks into the dynasty trade calculator. That is all part of Draft Kit Pro as well. Eva says Waddle straight up for Josh Jacobs in full PPR. Who would you rather have there, Jack? Waddle straight up or Josh Jacobs?
Yeah, that's Waddle for me, especially with how the Dolphins and Tua have looked. I'm going Waddle there.
Okay. We have in the rankings, Mark, we do have Josh Jacobs pretty far ahead of Waddle. My wide receiver bias makes me kind of lean a little bit Waddle here, but I don't want to say bad things about Josh Jacobs either. So I think there's smart minds can disagree, I think, on this one, I think is fair to say.
Yeah, I think if again, league structure matters. If you start 2 wide receivers only and 2 running backs, I would lean Jacobs there. If it's 3 wide receivers, I think it's a bit closer. I would personally lean Jacobs, I think. But yeah, I mean, it is a little close.
Michael Guest says, is there a realistic RB2 I could trade Madison for, or just wait for a blow up game and sell high whenever that occurs? I don't think you can sell Alexander Madison right now, man. I mean, what are you going to get for Alexander Madison at this point? I will again say I am worried about Alexander Madison, but I am not panicked on Alexander Madison because they continue to go to him in 2-minute drill, in base, around the goal line. Team's been struggling massively, especially the run game's been struggling massively, but role I think is still there for Alexander Madison. The concern will come if we start to see Ty Chandler eat into Alexander Madison at a really high rate. But yeah, at this point, I don't think you're going to get much for Alexander Madison. I probably wouldn't just sell low on him. I don't know. Maybe that's a fair question to ask. Would you guys sell low on Alexander Madison right now? I'll start with Jack.
I might be looking to get out, to be honest. I just think that all of the fears that the naysayers had during the offseason were kind of validated. Like, I don't think anyone questioned the week 1 workload. It's whether he was good enough to sustain that workload the entire season, and he's been pretty brutal so far. He had the fumble issues on Thursday night. So I think right now we have him 53rd overall, which is around his ADP. So I think if you can get mid 5th round value for him, I would be fine parting ways.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can get mid 5th round value for him, I guess is my point. Mark, any thoughts on what you would do if you had Alexander Madison right now?
Just looking at our ranks, the guys we have a little below that I think would be viable trade options, Jonathan Taylor, if you're in a decent spot, he should hopefully come back week 5. Brian Robinson, I think, is interesting. He looks to have the RB1 role pretty locked up in Washington. I think, I might want to bet on him over Madison potentially. And then Alvin Kamara, I will toss in there despite your love for Kendre. I mean, the role has been really good for Madison, so it's hard for me to sell. Like, when we kind of look at him versus Kyron, like Kyron has certainly gotten more touches early on, but in terms of their underlying metrics and how much they're on the field and out in routes, like I think Madison is just kind of purely a volume play, and that hasn't disappeared for me yet. I think good games are coming. They have Chicago still on the schedule coming up in a couple weeks. Like if you want to wait, I think you could wait till they play Chicago, because all indications are Chicago's defense is horrible, and Madison should hopefully have a good game then.
All right. We've covered it all on the rest of season Top 150 show. Appreciate y'all being here. I know I see a lot of start sit questions in chat. Easy ways to get start sit question and do the right thing, or let's give yourself a chance to do the right thing. Pat Thorman won the rankings competition last year. He's been in the top 10 6 out of the last 8 years. His rankings are part of Draft Kit Pro. They come out tonight. Our projections will also be out tonight. You can consult those. These are very, very, very mathematical based and our knowing ball based projections. And then Silva's matchups, you can read his take on every player in every game there. If you read those 3 things and you still don't know who to start or sit, I don't know what to tell you. So go ahead and pick up the in-season package, Draft Kit Pro. You will have all your start sit dreams answered. For Jack. For Mark. For producer Adam. I am Adam. Good luck in week 3.